On Neo-Earth, where humans and aliens coexisted under a fragile peace, Kael, a half-human, half-Xerian boy, dreamed of a quiet life. But everything changed when he stood up to Tyrus Vex, the arrogant son of Supreme Chancellor Vex, the most powerful man in the system. Tyrus had tormented weaker students for years, believing his father's wealth shielded him. One day he targeted a frail Xerian student. Kael intervened, his fists landing with righteous fury. The next day, he was expelled. His father, Doran, a loyal worker under Chancellor Vex, was also dismissed for raising a son who disrespected power. Never bow to injustice, Doran told his son that night, pride shining in his eyes. Days later, tragedy struck. A speeding hovercar slammed into Doran on the city's skybridge. The driver fled, leaving him to die. When the authorities investigated, a low-level worker was arrested. But Kael knew the truth. Tyrus had been behind the wheel. Fueled by grief, Kael stormed into the Vex estate, demanding justice. But the Chancellor only laughed. "You're nothing," he sneered, as Kael was dragged away. Hours later, he was sentenced to 5 years in a prison colony on the barren moon of Zyra. But Kael made a vow in that dark cell. "One day I'll return, and I'll take everything from you." The prison gates slammed shut, sealing Kael's fate on Zyra. Life there was brutal. Hard labor under a scorching sun, endless nights fending off desperate inmates. The weak had no place here. Kael learned fast. He fought, he endured, he survived. 5 years later, when the gates opened once more, he wasn't the same boy who had once begged for justice. That boy had died in the mines of Zyra. Now only a man remained, a man with a plan. Returning to Neo-Earth, Kael found himself a desolate outcast. But he had a vision, to build a business empire powerful enough to rival the Vex dynasty and expose their crimes. He started small, a rundown eatery in the lower districts serving fusion cuisine from both humans and aliens. But survival was brutal. No customers, no funds. Worse, Chancellor Vex used his influence to sabotage Kael at every turn. Then he met Leora, a sharp-witted former Xerian diplomat who saw something in him. "You don't just need a business," she said. "You need a brand." She became his manager, launching a bold marketing campaign. Their first major break? A high-stakes intergalactic cooking tournament. Win, and they'd gain credibility. Lose, and they'd be buried forever. Kael stepped into the arena, feeling the weight of every moment. From the stands, Tyrus Vex watched, smirking. Let's see who laughs last. The tournament was chaos. Competitors sabotaged one another. Bribes flowed like currency, and every twist of fate was designed by Chancellor Vex to tip the odds against Kael. Yet in the heart of the turmoil, Kael pressed on with unwavering determination, and Leora was always one step ahead. She had meticulously orchestrated a viral campaign, broadcasting Kael's arduous journey across the intergalactic network. As viewers tuned in, they witnessed a man rising from obscurity, a determined underdog whose resilience shone brighter with every challenge. Crowds began to gather at his modest fusion kitchen, and soon the small restaurant became a symbol of hope and rebellion, a movement in the making. Then during a live broadcast, everything shifted. Tyrus Vex, in a moment of blistering arrogance, openly mocked Kael. His contemptuous jibe, meant to belittle the street rat-turned-competitor, instead ignited public outrage. The mockery struck a chord with the masses, and support for Kael surged. When the tournament concluded, Fusion Kitchen was no longer just a business. It had morphed into a cultural phenomenon. Investors, moved by his story and the undeniable authenticity of his struggle, began pouring in capital. Branches of Fusion Kitchen sprouted across Neo-Earth, establishing Kael as a formidable rival to the Vex dynasty. Amid the newfound success, a game-changing secret came to light. Lyra, ever resourceful, had been gathering intelligence for months. In a quiet moment, when Tyrus grew overconfident in private, she covertly recorded him, boasting about the cover-up, an admission that revealed the unspeakable truth. He had directly implicated himself in the murder of Kael's father. This explosive evidence was the missing piece that could dismantle the corrupt empire once and for all. Armed with this damning recording, Kael and Leora chose a strategy of calculated exposure rather than impulsive retribution. Kael organized a grand banquet, inviting high-profile investors and former allies of the Vex regime. Knowing that Chancellor Vex would not miss the opportunity to attend, Kael set the stage for a public reckoning. At the banquet's climax, Leora stepped forward and projected the incriminating recording for every attendee to hear. The hall fell into stunned silence before erupting in outrage. Gasps and murmurs echoed as the truth of Tyrus's confession rippled through the crowd. Within hours, Tyrus was apprehended, and key investors began withdrawing their support, leaving the Vex Empire perilously unstable. Desperate to salvage his crumbling legacy, Chancellor Vex resorted to one final ruthless gambit. With his remaining resources, he orchestrated a hostile takeover of Kael's main headquarters, shutting it down overnight. Standing before the darkened, silent building, a symbol of everything he'd fought to create, Kael's voice trembled with determination as he vowed, "You took everything from me once, but not again." Though the blow was severe, it only served to kindle Kael's resolve further. Unwilling to succumb to despair, Kael immediately set about rebuilding. He reached out to former Vex executives who still cherished his father's memory, and together they resurrected Fusion Kitchen. Under their combined efforts, the business transformed into a culinary powerhouse that dwarfed its former self. In an unforeseen twist, a defeated and desperate Chancellor Vex appeared at Kael's doorstep. No longer the imposing figure of his past, he pleaded for assistance to salvage the remnants of his shattered empire. At that crossroads, Kael possessed every reason to obliterate his enemy completely. Yet, in a surprising act of strategic mercy and a desire to redefine the future, Kael chose instead to absorb the remnants of Vex's company. He installed a trusted old friend of his father, an embodiment of honor and integrity, to lead the organization into a new era, one where the sins of the past could be transformed into lessons for the future. As twilight gave way to the glittering lights of Neo-Earth, Kael turned to Leora with a quiet smile. "I've been so consumed by revenge," he admitted softly. "I never realized that the one person who stood by me through it all was right here." Leora's cheeks warmed as she replied, "Took you long enough." Standing side by side, they looked out over a city reborn, a future no longer defined solely by vengeance, but by resilience, redemption, and the promise of building something far greater. Thus, Kael's journey transformed from a quest for revenge into a legacy of hope, a legacy that truly lay beyond vengeance. Thanks for exploring with us on Beyond Storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more epic AI-powered stories.